Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine Podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and with me this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Helen Edwards, LLG President.
Hi everyone.
Now, in a week where the impact of the Conservative vote, which saw 148 MPs vote against Boris Johnson, is causing ripples, the permutations of that outcome in terms of bills passing through the Commons will no doubt be felt for some time. Many commentators are already speculating that there will be those seeking to exert substantial leverage, and indeed, as the BBC points out, a rebellion of 40 Conservatives or enough abstention could cancel out the government's usually large majority. In terms of committees, Tuesday saw the Prime Minister's advisor on the Ministerial Code appear before the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee. Michael Gove will answer questions on the government's levelling up plans, and Housing Minister Stuart Andrew will respond to questions on the government's housing plans, including housing targets for local councils. But the big focus this week, quite rightly, is the 5th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. Helen.
Yes, Tuesday saw the 5th anniversary of that awful tragedy which led to the deaths of 72 people. The inquiry into the Grenfell Tower fire is still ongoing. However, outcomes and findings from the first phase, which commenced in 2018, have been published. Listeners will be aware that a critical finding was that cladding installed on the tower as part of a refurbishment in 2015 to 2016 was the primary cause of the fire's spread. The inquiry has already made numerous recommendations, and its findings make extremely uncomfortable reading for very good reasons. Everyone involved in public service at all levels needs to be aware of the collective failures to ensure the horrifying events of 5 years ago are never repeated. In terms of the law, well, so far the government has moved to put in place protections through the Fire Safety Act 2021 and the Fire Safety England Regulations 2022. The Building Safety Act 2022, which provides that leaseholders in buildings over 11 metres will not have to pay for cladding remediation works, which listeners might remember wasn't the case when the government first looked at remediation, and of course now the Social Housing Regulation Bill. The Social Housing Regulation Bill is designed, says the government, to mean more people living in decent, well looked after homes, enjoying the quality of life they deserve. At present, it provides for failing social housing landlords to face unlimited fines and Ofsted-style inspections. It will also give the regulator of social housing stronger powers to issue unlimited fines, enter properties with only 48 hours notice, down from 28 days, and make emergency repairs where there is a serious risk to tenants, with landlords footing the bill.
Well, I know that Thursday there'll be a backbench debate led by Labour's Richard Burden to mark the 5th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire, which should be available on Parliament Live to stream for those who want to watch it. Now, continuing on the theme of housing and reported in the Local Government Lawyer, the Prime Minister has announced that the Right to Buy scheme will be extended to 2.5 million tenants in housing association accommodation. Kate Henderson, Chief Executive of the National Housing Federation, said that housing associations' priority is to provide homes for the 4.2 million people currently in need of social housing in England. This includes 1 in every 5 children, many of whom are living in overcrowded conditions or homelessness. Many of whom are living in overcrowded conditions or homeless in B&Bs and other temporary accommodation. Right to Buy pilots have shown that there is not enough money from sales to build new social homes to replace those sold, meaning a net loss of social housing. Adding housing associations already build thousands of homes for shared ownership every year, helping people take their first steps onto the housing ladder. However, we are deeply concerned about the long-term impact of Right to Buy, and any loss of social housing will make the challenge of providing homes for those in need even harder.
Now in other news, the LGA has published its Modern Slavery Survey for winter 2021-22. It's absolutely horrendous that this despicable act continues to happen, but it does, and councils are well placed to identify possible victims. Their report presents the findings of its survey, which was conducted to explore what structures and work streams councils have put in place to respond to modern slavery and how councils are currently supporting victims. The full report is available on the LGA website, but some of the key findings include 7 out of 10 councils said modern slavery was an agreed priority for the council or one of its committees. Just over 8 out of 10 councils said they provided training on modern slavery to staff. Almost all respondents said their council had an agreed point of contact or pathway for members of staff to raise concerns about possible adult victims of modern slavery. District councils were significantly more likely to always refer identified adult victims than county and single-tier councils. Nearly 8 out of 10 respondents from districts and single-tier councils said they were aware of the recent update to the Homelessness Code of Guidance regarding priority status for victims of modern slavery. County and single-tier councils were significantly more likely to have a transparency in supply chains (TISC) statements in place than district councils. And just under 3/5 of councils said their procurement team carries out modern slavery due diligence on high-value contracts.
Well, that's very interesting, Helen. According to the government's 2021 annual report on modern slavery, the number of potential victims referred has risen from 2,340 in 2014 to more than 10,000 in 2020. The profile of victims and the worst threats have also changed, with labour and criminal exploitation now the most prevalent forms of modern slavery identified in the UK. The proportion of child and male victims has also increased. So an incredibly important issue for local authorities to play their part. Now, Helen, what can you tell us about the actions and rhetoric of the executive on the role of the judiciary?
Well, on the 8th of June, an all-party parliamentary group on democracy and the Constitution published its report following an inquiry into the impact of, quote, the actions and rhetoric of the executive since 2016 on the constitutional role of the judiciary, which was funded by the Joseph Rowntree Reform Trust. That's important to note because it is not published by Parliament, but independent of it. The report found that ministers have, in attacking judges, quote, sometimes failed to act in a constitutionally proper or helpful manner, and that the offices of Lord Chancellor and Attorney General and the appointment of politicians with little or no legal experience or standing has left the executive without a strong figure to assist ministers' understanding of their constitutional duties. The APPG made 3 principal recommendations. Firstly, the independence of the judiciary in the forthcoming independent review of the Constitutional Reform Act. Second, provide statutory guidance for ministers on their constitutional duties towards the judiciary. And thirdly, provide statutory guidance on the appointment and conduct of law ministers. Geraint Davis MP and chair of the APPG wrote within the report, democracy, human rights and the rule of law are our fundamental values. They rely on an independent judicial system to protect the rights of citizens from the state and to defend our democracy. And whilst we're on the subject of constitution and democracy, I would like to say how disappointed I am with Boris Johnson's unjustified attack on lawyers yesterday. To say that lawyers acting on behalf of immigrants were abetting the work of criminal gangs and that laws may have to be changed because lawyers were, quote, very good at picking up ways of trying to stop the government from upholding what we think is a sensible law was quite extraordinary. I'd like to say that I support the joint statement issued by the Law Society and the Bar Council yesterday, asking the Prime Minister to stop attacks on legal professionals performing their proper functions.
Well, it really is quite worrying that this line of attack persists, Helen, when you take it all together with the attempts to reduce judicial review provisions last year and the current reworking of the Human Rights Act, not to mention the litany of successful court challenges on the government's actions during COVID. It's a very, very serious concern. And on that rather bleak note, that's it for another edition of the LLG podcast, but at least most of us should be enjoying some lovely weather this week, which always cheers me up. Next week, the podcast will be back on a Monday when I'll be joined once again by Dennis Hall, Bulletin Editor. So thank you for joining me today, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. I've enjoyed being here and now off to enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you for listening. Have a good week, everyone.